30 days of testimony, 8 weeks of your lives have been spent listening to this case. And many of those weeks were filled with minutia. Minutia because the defendant, Karen Reed, has decided to launch an all-out attack on every single witness in this case to avoid accountability. Her entire defense hinged on it's everybody except for Karen. And all of us have paid the price. Every witness has been terrorized for the past year. You have been forced to sit through 8 weeks of testimony, and it's up to you to decide her fate. She dated John O'Keefe for 2 years, and she grew really close to his family, particularly Erin O'Keefe, who she talked to almost every day. They were close girlfriends. New Year's Eve, in Aruba, Karen had gone with John and his niece and nephew to Aruba. She demanded her own room because she didn't want to be near those kids. In Aruba, John had disappeared. He was drinking, partying, and she saw him in the hallway hugging one of his friends, and she said, "Who the fuck is that?" Made a scene and told the girl to go fuck herself. People started to get the gist that, she was a little wacky. John O'Keefe's girlfriend was a little nutty. She might not be okay. John O'Keefe kind of kept his distance from the rest of the group, knowing that, Karen could blow off at any moment and attack someone. So he kind of kept his distance from those girls that he was the godfather of their child. And that was the first sign of trouble from the exterior. But what we know from talking to the niece and nephew was that there was a lot of fighting going on inside the house behind closed doors. There was a lot of arguing. John was asking Karen to leave the house, and she refused to do so shortly before his death. We know that 2 weeks after the Aruba incident, 2 weeks before his death, they were watching a football game, and Brian Higgins was over his house. And while they were all sitting together on the couch, Karen started texting him saying, "I think you're hot. You should sleep over tonight." So while that doesn't mean that she's a murderer, it certainly shows that she's kind of ratchet, kind of manipulative. What we know is that after that happened, she planted a kiss on Brian Higgins in the garage and then walked him outside. She tells Brian Higgins that John kept showing her the Ring camera asking if her and Higgins were hooking up, because she knew exactly how much to leave on the camera to create suspicion. She's manipulative. She's a liar. But then again, maybe she's just a thought. January 29th, her and John O'Keefe are fighting in the morning about what the kids are having for breakfast. Typical couple arguments. She reaches out to Erin O'Keefe and says, "Just another day, I wish I never talked to an O'Keefe after 2004. She says this because her and John originally dated in 2004, and in a text message to Higgins, she says, "Everything was good until his sister died and everything got fucked up." That's sweet. And then he had to take on the kids, which she never wanted any kids. She never wanted to spend time with kids, and she was pretty bitter about it. And she made that pretty clear in the text messages to Brian Higgins. So on that day, January 29th, we see text messages between her and John, and she's repeatedly calling him, and he's like, "Stop calling, I'm not answering." Eventually, he gives in, and he's like, "All right, meet us over at McCarthy's. I'm counting on you for a ride." He was counting on her for a ride, and a blizzard was coming. Important. So she meets up at McCarthy's, and she friggin' pounds 7 vodkas in like 2 hours. She looks like she weighs about 100 pounds, so, she's probably a little tipsy. So they leave McCarthy, she's holding a glass, and they walk into Waterfall, where the rest of the group is. Now, the rest of this group that they meet up with at the Waterfall is going to regret going to the Waterfall that night for many, many years. Because what transpires and what she created after this night in an effort to destroy every single witness. Now, we have Jen McCabe, whose daughter is close friends with John's niece, and she kind of helps John with the daughter a lot, takes her places, gives her rides, that kind of thing, while he's working. Jen McCabe's sister-in-law is Nicole Albert, who's married to Brian Albert, who's also a Boston cop. We have John O'Keefe, who is a Boston cop, Brian Albert, who is a Boston cop. Although they are both Boston police officers, they do not know each other that well. They've met a few times through their mutual friends in Canton. Brian Higgins is an ATF agent that has an office at the Canton Police Department, who is there also. That's the one she's trying to bang because she thinks he's hot, but he's not. So they're all hanging out, they're drinking, they're having fun. John and Karen are only there for an hour with these people. And at the end of the night, Brian Albert's like, oh, I'm having people over. You guys should come over. Like, it's my son's birthday. He already has people over. Come back to the house. Chris Albert's pizza shop is just a couple of doors away, and Karen was trying to get people to go back there to make pizza. She wanted to keep the party going. But instead, they all decided to go back to Fairview Road. But something happened on the way to Fairview Road, because neither one of them ever made it inside that house. Now, on the way there, John O'Keefe reached out to Jen McCabe, called Jen McCabe for directions, and he typed it into the Waze at 12:20. The speculation is that Jen McCabe mentioned, oh, you know the street that so-and-so lives on? One of John's ex-girlfriends. And Karen overheard and got pissed, started spitting into the jealous rage again. They made a few wrong turns, probably because they were fighting. They end up pulling in front of the house at 34 Fairview Road. Right behind them is Ryan Nagel and his crew, who was there to pick up his sister. So they're right behind Karen. Karen's pulling up. She's inching forward. She never puts the car in park. There's people looking out the window. There's people coming into the house, coming out to Ryan Nagel's car, going back in the house. Ryan Nagel pulls away. Jen McCabe looks out the window one last time and tells John, park behind me. But the next time she looks out, the car is gone. And Karen and John never go inside that house. What we know is that as Karen is speeding away, she is calling John to say, I fucking hate you. And then we see her tower data that she's going back towards the One Meadows home, and she connects to his Wi-Fi at 12:36. She then proceeds to call him multiple more times. A few butt dials. We can hear her walking in the garage, walking up the stairs like a creep. She sends a bunch of text messages, and then she sends a voicemail saying, nobody knows where the fuck you are, you fucking pervert. That's weird. Wasn't she just with him at Fairview Road? I mean, what's going on? What does she mean she doesn't know where he is? It's a blizzard. Where the hell else would he be? He's either with you in your car or wherever you left him. He's not chilling in a blizzard with no jacket. Come on, girl. And then she places a phone call to her 70-year-old parents at 1 a.m. I mean, I don't call my parents at 1 a.m. unless it's an emergency. What did you do, Karen? So Karen proceeds to call John O'Keefe 53 times throughout the night, text messages, calls, etc. At 4:40 a.m., she gets through to her parents. We don't know what's on that phone call because her parents didn't testify. And if it was anything good, I think they would have testified. But they didn't. So then she proceeds to wake up John O'Keefe's niece and say, call John. I think I might have done something. Yeah, Karen, you did do something. What did you do? And then she's pacing up and down the hallway, and then she comes into the niece's room again and says, I think he might have got hit by a plow. Karen proceeds to call a lot of his friends, the Camaranos, Kerry Roberts, Jen McCabe, and the niece testifies that each person that she called, she starts telling a different story to. So at first it was that they got in an argument, she dropped him off at Waterfall. Then it was he might have got hit by a plow. Then she starts telling people about her broken taillight. Well, that's kind of weird. How'd you get a broken taillight, Karen? When would she even have to be in reverse? Did she even ever turn around? So then we see her on the Ring camera at John O'Keefe's house, backing out and turning the wheel towards his car so that she kind of dings his car, so that she has an alibi for the damage to the back of her Lexus. Even though her own expert, Dr. Wolf, says that it's impossible for that taillight to have broken at such a low speed. Oops. So she pulls away. Into the night, she's caught on camera at the Canton Library driving up towards the waterfall and then back out down the street, down Washington Street. She's caught on the camera at the temple, and then she disappears. No one knows where she went after that, but it does seem like she was retracing her steps from the night before, and the next left turn was to take her onto Cedar Crest, which would then take her onto Fairview Road, where she had been the night before. And then about 12 minutes after that phone call, she shows up at Jen McCabe's. Did she call other people after that? Did she consult with her parents? Maybe. So she shows up to Jen McCabe screaming her head off and making a scene and saying, we need to find John, my cracked taillight, yada, yada, yada. And as Jen leaves to go outside with Karen, Carrie Roberts pulls up. Another person that Karen was reaching out to in a panic. Hysterical. Already hysterical. And so Carrie says, well, did you check the house? Maybe he's home. And Karen says, no. She didn't check the house because she already knew where he was. She just saw him in the snow. So they pile into their cars. And Carrie Roberts is driving behind Jen McCabe, who's driving Karen's car, and sees the broken taillight with metal sticking out. They get back to John O'Keefe's house, no sign of John. So they all pile into Carrie Roberts' vehicle and they head over to Fairview Road. On the way to Fairview Road, Karen starts bringing up, like, what if he's at this ex's house and that ex's house? And Jen McCabe's just kind of like, are you crazy? No. And so as they pull up to 34 Fairview Road, Karen starts kicking the door and screaming, there he is, there he is. Nobody can see anything. And she runs out of the car and runs over to a mound of snow and uncovers the body. Now, Lucky Laughran, Karen Reed's witness, also says that he just drove down the street at 5:30 a.m. and didn't see any body. So that tells you that that body was not visible to anybody at that point. It was covered in snow and nobody could see the body. Karen knew where he was. Carrie Roberts starts giving CPR. They're calling 911. 911 shows up. And the first responder says that Karen says, this is all my fault. I did this. The paramedics show up and they said, what happened to him? And she says, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Oh my God, I hit him. And she keeps repeating herself, saying the same things over and over and over. They don't understand what I hit him means because her car is not there. They see that he has a bloody laceration on the back of his head and that he's ice cold. So Carrie Roberts takes her away. So Jen McCabe is told to go and wake the homeowners up. Jen McCabe goes inside the house to wake up the homeowners, Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, her sister and brother-in-law. Karen gets in Carrie's car and Carrie is taking her home. Now, on the way, the cops get a phone call from Karen Reed's father saying she needs to be sectioned, she's attempting suicide, or she's threatening to commit suicide. And so Carrie Roberts drives back to the scene and a new ambulance comes to pick up Karen and take her to the crazy bin. While she's in that ambulance, she's hysterical and then she's getting all indignant and talking shit about Carrie Roberts and then saying, I'm not taking care of those kids. Who's going to take care of those kids? I mean, if my loved one was dead on the side of the road, that wouldn't be the first thing I thought of. But we all have our priorities, I guess. And so she shows up at the hospital. The parents show up at the hospital. John's pronounced dead. Everyone's in shock. And as they're returning home to John O'Keefe's house, Paul O'Keefe gets a call from Karen saying, oh, can I come by the house? I want to talk to the kids. I want to talk to the kids. You know, the kids that she never wanted and doesn't care. And she's definitely not taking care of those ones. So immediately when she arrives at the house, she starts her car. She had no intention of staying there. She just goes in the house for about 10-15 minutes, comes out with a very small bag, and it takes off. On the way back to Dighton, she talks to Erin O'Keefe, who she was close friends with, who she talked to almost every day. And she tells her, I just have to remember the bad times. And she also says, I'm probably never going to speak to you again. And Erin said, what do you mean? We're friends. And that was it. She never heard from Karen again. Now, if this really was a tragic accident, or if this was a death that was caused from some unknown thing, Karen would have been very much involved with the funeral arrangements and the kids transitioning and, you know, what was going to happen next in their life, since she was very involved with the kids prior to John's death. But no, she cut off all communication with them, never spoke to them again. And, you know, if it was a tragic accident, I think she would have been supported by everybody. But Karen knew that this was no accident. So she had to cut everybody off. As the morning goes on, Jen McCabe starts to realize, like, Karen was talking about her taillight. Oh, maybe, like, she hit him with the car, and starts to make that connection. Her and Carrie discuss it, and then Jen calls the cops to come back and tells the cops what she's thinking. And so the detectives start to make some calls. They call Karen Reed and tell them that they want to talk to her, and she agrees. And at that point, Karen Reed calls a DUI attorney. So we did see Karen at McCarthy's down in 7 Vodkas. Karen's blood alcohol was at 0.08 when she was at the hospital, so they can only estimate that, she was double or triple the legal limit at the time of the accident at 12:30. And so, yeah, she probably did need a DUI attorney. And I think that's what this whole thing was about. She knew that she hit him. She knew she took him out. But she didn't want to get a DUI, so she had to, leave him there until she sobered up a little bit. What a sicko. And then in the morning when she sobered up, she went back to find him. Now, Karen's made up many, many stories since the beginning of this. At the beginning, her attorney was saying, this was a tragic accident. There's no criminal intent. This is awful. She's heartbroken. She loved this man. But that's before we've seen all her text messages where she's trying to shag Brian Higgins, and all her voicemails where she's screaming at John, telling him to go fuck himself, that he's a pervert and a loser, and all these names. That's before she was trying to tell everybody that she dropped him off at Waterfall and never remembered going to Fairview Road. Before they saw her on camera going back towards Fairview Road, before going to Jen McCabe's house. So when Yuri Buchanan and Trooper Proctor interview Karen Reed that first day, she's sitting on the couch with a laptop, probably deleting ring cam videos. And she tells them that she just dropped him off and did a 3-point turn and went home. That's it. And they were like, okay, how did you do that 3-point turn? Because where he was located, the damage on her car does not match a 3-point turn. And so, within a few days, she's arrested for manslaughter. She posts bail, and they're going with the whole tragic accident thing. Until a few months later, she decides that, nope, he was beat up by Brian and Colin Albert, and they broke her taillight, or something. She says in custody, something to that effect. My taillight is pulverized, and he got beat up by Colin and Albert and Brian Albert, and it's a big joke. No remorse in her voice. She's just a weirdo. She's just an unremorseful narcissist. And so for a year, she has launched an all-out attack on all of the witnesses, saying that he was beaten up inside that house with the 11 witnesses that you had to hear from. Some are family, some are unrelated. Witnesses that pulled up outside the house while she was there, unrelated to the homeowners. Phone data which shows that he never went inside the house and that he died in the spot where he was found. But she still pushed that theory that he went inside the house, and every single one of the witnesses has been threatened, attacked, and their name has been dragged through the mud. But the biggest one of all, Jen McCabe, whose house Karen showed up to at 5 a.m. to go find John. Jen McCabe, who Karen says, Google how long to die in cold. That morning when his body was found, Karen asked the same question to paramedics on scene. They had Rick from St. Pete sign an affidavit in April of 2023 saying that search happened at 2:27 a.m. And that's when everything blew up. And that's why you've had to hear from all these different experts and witnesses on that Google search. Ian Whiffen writes the program. And he has said, and he has had to change the program since then because of this case. Because Richard Green has misinterpreted this data. Purposely, most likely. Because it gives an element of doubt. But it did a lot more than that. It was a way for Karen Reed to persecute the star witness of this case. The witness that was with her when she found the body. The witness that was with her the night before. The witness that talked to John O'Keefe right before he died. a witness that saw Karen Reed's car out front of the house at 34 Fairview Road waiting for them to come inside. That was the main witness she wanted to attack. Now, Colin Albert wasn't even at the house at the time, but she just wanted to blame a 17-year-old kid that had nothing to do with it too. So Colin Albert became her second patsy, and Brian Albert, patsy number 3. They were all there. They all killed John O'Keefe inside the house, even though there was 11 people that never saw him go inside the house. There's phone data that shows that he never went inside the house, and Colin Albert wasn't even there at the time. But a lot of people online want to believe this salacious story, this conspiracy cover-up, because that's what people like. And so she's used that story to try to manipulate people in this case. She's used that story to get outside involvement in this case, to get so-called experts to look at the details of this case, to have the media run stories and stories and stories of misinformation about this case. And as we sit here and look at John O'Keefe's autopsy photos and she giggles with her attorneys, as we look at John O'Keefe's blood-stained clothes and she smirks and laughs and winks at her supporters, ask yourself, is this something that happened by accident? Is this the demeanor of someone that is so broken up for accidentally killing someone that they loved? Or is this the behavior of a sick sociopath? Charge number 1, leaving the scene of an accident where someone was killed or injured. Her taillight fragments were found in his clothes and around his body underneath the snow. Her taillight was banged out. Immediately, she was calling, raging, saying, "John, I hate you." When he left her vehicle, he stopped moving a few feet from her vehicle and never moved again. Did she leave the scene of an accident? Yes, she did. OUI manslaughter. Did we see her pounding 7 drinks at the waterfall? Did we see her blood alcohol was at the legal limit the next morning, like 9 hours later? Yeah. I think we got that one covered too. Second-degree murder requires malice aforethought. Malice aforethought, intent to harm with the possibility of killing. It does not mean that you harm somebody with the intent to kill them, but you did something intentionally to harm someone in some way that resulted in a death. Now, I've never reversed my car 60 feet. I've never reversed for 60 feet, 24 miles an hour in reverse, pushing the pedal down 75% of the way by accident. I don't think anyone really has. I don't think that's something that can happen by accident. And that's what the Lexus data shows. That's what the tech stream shows. Now, she had some experts testify that they're not typical pedestrian injuries, which is correct. They're not typical pedestrian injuries, because most pedestrians are hit in an acute way where the bumper hits their legs and there's a spot of impact. He was hit in reverse, and the back of the car is pretty flat, so there were a few points of contact, his knee and his arm. And the Lexus taillight was broken. Now, her experts have confirmed that her backing into his car could not have broken her taillight. And for whatever reason, they took a lot of time putting a glass into a cannon and shooting it at the taillight and dropping a pumpkin at the back of the car to see the damage of the taillight. Neither of those theories are what the Commonwealth opines. And anytime you're dealing with an accident reconstruction or a murder scene, it is a theory. It is a theory that, there's many different options. And we can look at it many different ways. But the only person that's ever going to know exactly what happened to John O'Keefe is Karen Reed. The rest of it is speculation. Now, did he hit the corner of the car? Was his arm outstretched? We don't know. We can opine that it was based on his injuries matching the pattern of the grooved taillight piece. We can see the pattern imprinted in his arm. Now, the defense wants you to believe that those are the results of an animal attack, an animal with no DNA. They want you to believe that the taillight just magically burst into flames because she tapped his bumper leaving the driveway. They want you to believe that somehow somebody else killed him even though he stopped moving immediately after stepping out of Karen Reed's car. They want you to believe that maybe, possibly, there's reasonable doubt that something else happened when her taillight fragments are spread all throughout his clothes and all around his body. They want you to believe that his shoe and his hat and the taillight fragments might have been planted there under the snow. And while the experts may disagree on exactly how this happened, what we do know is that he has marks on his body that match the taillight that was broken in that location, and that she came back the next morning saying, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. We know that she called her parents at 1 a.m. right after it happened, and then started leaving voicemails saying, John, where are you? Nobody knows where you are. She knew where he was. She put him exactly where he was. And a few hours later, when nobody else could see him hidden in the snow, she brought them back and knew exactly where his body was. Now, if you're looking for reasonable doubt, most murder cases have maybe one eyewitness that sees a random car pull up or sees someone drive by or sees something. In this case, we have 7 witnesses that saw her car outside the house after she lied about ever being there. In this case, we have the murder weapon with his DNA on it. In this case, we have his hair on the murder weapon. In this case, we have the suspect admitting to the crime the next morning. In this case, we have a suspect that has changed her story 7 times. In this case, we have a suspect that has launched a social media campaign against all of the witnesses. In this case, we have a sociopath, and her name is Karen Reed. John O'Keefe was a great man. He took responsibility of his sister's children after she passed away. But Karen Reed never wanted kids. They were a burden to her. And in the heat of the moment, she ended that relationship real quick. John O'Keefe's family and friends have been tormented for 2 years with the lies and the stories coming out of this defense team. John O'Keefe's friends and family are counting on you to finally close this chapter and give John O'Keefe the justice he deserves. Lock her up.